I recently testified before a subcommittee of the House Judiciary Committee, and I was asked this question when I was talking about possible reforms, possible ways to get rid of existing regulations that are problematic. Aren't there already processes that do this? And the answer is yes, there already are ways that do this. One of them is through the review that's required from Executive Order 12866, signed by Bill Clinton back in 1993. That requires agencies to occasionally look back at their rules, their major rules, and see if they're ineffective or otherwise undesirable, obsolete. And then there's also the fact that every president, dating back to Jimmy Carter, has had some sort of initiative that has tried to look at existing regulations called regulatory look back or retrospective review, depending on who's phrasing it. Every president has done this, going back to Jimmy Carter. Yes, there are processes. It has been attempted. In fact, the fact that Bill Clinton did this, had his project go on in 1996, 1997, led by Al Gore, called the National Partnership for Reinventing Government, sort of tells you that, number one, that Executive Order 12866 must not have done all that much good, because that was 1993, and then the look back that President Clinton initiated was several years after that. But more importantly is, all of these initiatives, including Executive Order 12866, are requiring agencies to look back at their own rules. There's no independence in the review. And I would argue that that's going to lead to failure every single time. And here's my evidence. You already saw this graph. There's not really much visible change in this process. President after president after president has said, let's try to fix this, and none has had any substantive change in the continual growth of regulation. Here's another way of looking at that same graph. This is the number of pages added to or taken away from the Code of Federal Regulations each year, going back to 1976. 30 of 37 years, you saw pages being added to the Code of Federal Regulations. 7 years, there were some subtractions. Arguably, some of those subtractions may have been the result of presidential initiatives. The late 90s in particular stand out. That's probably the result of the national partnership that I referred to earlier. And the 80s, those deregulatory years were actually most likely the result of acts of Congress, the deregulation of transportation, railroad, trucking, and airline deregulation that were actually all started under Jimmy Carter in the late 70s. But the big broad picture here is, in 30 of 37 years, pages are added, and I don't think that speaks well to the various presidents' initiatives that have tried to change this process.